Alright, so this is the build of Mist Valley Ninjas that I played at Regionals this past weekend. So in this video I'm going to do a deck profile of my deck for the next Challengers format, and afterwards I'm going to do a brief tournament report. I went 3-3 over 6 rounds. I played against 4 Qliphorts, 1 Shadal, and 1 Gravekeeper. I thought about making 2 different videos, but I decided that I would just make them into one because I know I'm going to be making a lot of changes to my build, so I'm going to be posting a deck profile about itself soon enough anyways, and a 6-round tournament report is small enough to fit into half of a video. So I'm going to be keeping the deck profile part of this video short. If you want to see a more in-depth video on the core of this deck, I would recommend checking out some of my earlier videos on this, or if it's come out, my next deck profile after I change up the deck. In this video I mostly want to focus on the tech choices, the stuff that isn't involved in the deck's core. So for the monsters, I played the core, obviously, 1 Apex Avian, 3 Falcon, and 3 Hanzo. Out of these ones, I'd like to point out that Falcon is kind of right now, just because Qliphorts can so easily get to 2100 attack. So when they normal summon their monsters, they're only at 1800 attack, but if they have a sacrifice equipped to their monster, it's 21, and if they have any of the pendulum skills that are 1, or if they have any non-scout scales for the 9 scale, then it'll either decrease Falcon's attack by 300 or increase their monster's attack by 300, in which case they're essentially 2100 attack, and Falcon is smaller than them. So that's rather annoying, having somebody be able to normal summon a monster that can beat over Falcon. I still found him to be pretty good, and it's not really like there's anything you can play instead of him. There's not very much alternatives. And then filling out my monster lineup, I'm playing 1 Upstart, 1 Murmillo, and 1 Zephyros. Upstart has been really good. The fact that there are less Shadal decks floating around makes him better, and he's also really good against Qliphorts, just because rank 4s are really good against Qliphorts. A lot of the times when I beat Qliphorts, it was because I was making rank 4s, and my opponent just couldn't answer that. Murmillo was decent. Being able to search bottomless is nice. I really like having the MST on legs with his special summon effect, though I don't think I ever actually used that at the tournament. I did use him to search bottomless, though, I'm pretty sure. And Zephyros was really good, basically for the same reason that Upstart was good. I just used him for rank 4 plays. For the spells, I played triple reinforcement and triple pot of duality. Not much needs to be said on that. And then soul charge, obvious. There's no reason to not play that in the deck. And then 3 MST mained. You definitely need this against Qliphorts, which is the most common matchup this format so far. You don't win if you don't draw MST. You need this for Scout, and you also need this for Skill Drain. Hitting Skill Drain is probably a little bit more important than hitting Scout, but you don't want your opponent to have either of those. I played 1 Regeki. Basically, I wanted to cut cards, and I couldn't think of what to put in, so this was filler. The cards that I cut were 1 Sazonk and 1 Time Space Trap Hole. Time Space Trap Hole I found to be terrible. You don't really gain much from it. It's usually just like a 1-for-1, and you end up paying a bunch of life points. Against Qliphorts is really bad because the only time they get to use it is when they're set up, and then they burn you for a whole bunch of damage, and then they can just normal summon and kill you. So it's not a good card right now. And I know from previous testing that 1 target for Murmillo is fine. It's not optimal. It'd be better to have 2, but I wouldn't play 2 unless I could play 2 bottomless, because the other targets are just not that good. And then the other card I cut was Sazonk. Sazonk is still alright, but I find him to be rather slow. The main reason I was playing him was because Upstart was so bad before, but now that Upstart's decent again, then I don't really see too much benefit in Sazak. It is situationally useful, but I just hate drawing it. So I did play Regeki, and Regeki was okay. A lot of things float, but not everything floats. Sometimes you can get value out of it, and it does clear the board for you to get attacks in, so it has some use. I didn't want to play Upstart Goblin as filler, just because in this deck I search so much, there's cards that I want to keep in the deck, and it's not really worth it giving my opponent 1,000 life points just to potentially draw like an Apex Avian or an Upstart Golden Ninja that I want to keep in the deck. So then 3 Transformation, 3 Call the Haunted, those are both core cards. 3 Fiendish Chain still. It's not that great against Qliphorts because they don't have effects that you can negate, but it does have some utility. You can stop their attacks, and sometimes just stalling and not letting them attack is pretty good if they only have one monster and they can't get to other monsters. And this is extremely good in some other matchups. It's really good against anything that normal summons anything you can attack over with Falcon, just because you can keep reusing your Fiendish Chain over and over again. Vanities was sided out pretty much all tournament. I find this to be really bad against Qliphorts. They hardly ever special summon, so like the only times they special summon is when they activate Disc's effect and when they're pendulum summoning. And if you try to use this to stop the pendulum summon, you have to activate it preemptively because the pendulum summon is inherent. So basically you're just leaving yourself vulnerable to MST, and also they can just normal summon monsters and attack over you even if they can't special summon, because their monsters are pretty big. This is still really good against Burning Abyss and Shadalls, but I just hate this against Qliphorts. 1 Solemn Warning, 1 Bottomless, they're both really good right now. Solemn Warning stops pretty much everything, and Bottomless, even though it can't hit the smaller monsters like Dante, it can still hit things like Virgil, so this is useful in pretty much every matchup. And this is one of the best cards against Qliphorts. It's really good against them. Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, I feel, is pretty core to the deck. You need to be able to discard the Apex Avian. However, it's not necessarily core that it has to be Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. You could play Regeki Breaker Karma Cut, so I think it's still worth discussing it. I found this to be rather mediocre, but I feel like Karma Cut and Regeki Break would be even more mediocre. Regeki Break can hit the Scouts and Skill Drain much more effectively than Phoenix Wing Wind Blast can. However, at that point, you might as well just be playing Twister or Dust Tornado, just because why would you be discarding to play MST? You know what I mean? And against monsters, Regeki Break is just totally subpar. It's not that good. Just destroying one monster and sending it to the grave. It doesn't even banish like Bottomless does. And then Karma Cut is pretty bad right now because you can't use it on spell trap cards. Phoenix Wing Wind Blast you can. So I don't really think there's any other thing you can play besides Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, even though it felt rather mediocre to me. And then Wiretap was amazing. I really want to play 3 Wiretaps in the main deck. It might be too much with 3 MSTs, 3 Wiretaps, but I think that's probably the way to go. That's probably the best option. You just have to hope that you don't go up against something like Lightsworn, where these cards are relatively dead. But in matches like that, you can just side them out, and you'll probably win anyways. Comparing the two, Wiretap is better against Burning Abyss in Shadalls, and Mystical Space Typhoon is better against Qliphorts, but they both have some value in both matchups. Wiretap probably has the most universal value. MST is pretty bad against Shadalls. And against Burning Abyss, you have to kind of get lucky and hope you MST their Fire Lakes the turn they set them. It's really the best value you can get out of MST in that matchup. So the side deck I've switched up a lot since before. I put the MSTs in the main deck and started siding some cards that used to be in the main deck. I'm also siding new cards. So DD Warrior Lady, same as before. This is good against Shadalls. I didn't really draw it, though, at all. I'm siding Dark Simorgh plus the 2 anti-spell fragrance. I did get the lock-off once at the tournament, so that was an instant win. Um, Aside from that, Simorgh was good against Gravekeepers, and otherwise it was useless. And then anti-spell fragrance was basically an auto win against Qliphorts if they didn't have MST, and that's even considering the fact that I didn't get it out with Simorgh a lot of the times. Usually I just had anti-spell fragrance by itself, and they just couldn't play with that because it doesn't let them play their scouts onto the field. So as long as you have MST destroy their turn 1 scout, because they play turn 1 scout every game pretty much, they won't be able to activate their second one, and they won't be able to maintain card advantage. You can beat them. They're just beat down after that, so you just have to beat harder than them, basically. This is a pretty big monster, so you can get over their stuff as long as they don't have skill drain up. Wiretap, this is really good. Probably should be going into the main. I sided this against a lot of stuff. Pretty much everything except for maybe Qliphorts I would side this in against, and I would consider siding this against Qliphorts depending on what traps they run, because this hits Qliphort's wiretaps, this hits their trap stuns, and it hits other stuff too, but those are the main ones that you can't really destroy with MST, unless you just randomly hit it during the end phase, but you're never going to do that against Qliphorts. Double Full House, I sided this in against Qliphorts. I actually drew this against Gravekeepers, and it was extremely good against them for obvious reasons. I don't think I actually really do this against any of the Qliphort players. But I really like this against that deck because they do play traps. The fact that Qliphort plays traps basically opens them up to this card, and it's really, really good in this deck. It's so good that I feel like it might be worth playing 3, but I don't think that's probably the best idea. I feel like you might draw doubles if you did that, and usually you can't resolve 2 of them. That's pretty tough. Magic Cylinder, this is actually really good against Qliphorts. I sided this in against them. They burn through all of their life points with Skill Drain and Scout, and then if you get a few attacks in, then Magic Cylinder just one of their monsters and they lose. So this is pretty good, as long as they don't have like a wiretap or trap stun. It's also obviously good in time, but I managed to avoid going into time. I've done that like the past 30 matches I've done or so, I haven't gone into time. So that's really good. I've gotten better at playing this deck quickly. You don't want to go into time with this deck. One Compulse, I used to have this in the main deck, but I sided it now because this sucks against Qliphorts. Obviously you want to side this in against Shadalls and everything like that. I didn't really draw it though. Soul Drain, Macro, it's obvious. Burning Abyss, Shadalls, anything that uses the Grave. I did draw Soul Drain, but I misplayed it. I'll get into that later. And I did not draw Macrocosmos. You could actually play this against Qliphorts to banish their monsters instead of sending them to the extra deck. I don't think that's really worth it. I think it's better to just prevent them from ever having a complete set of scales so they can't pendulum summon. I think that's a better way of playing against them. Of course, this also does prevent their sacrifice from floating, which is really good. So this might be worth playing. I don't know. I haven't tried it. Double Shadow Imprisoning is obvious where this is good. I didn't really draw this all tournament. Double Light Imprisoning, I didn't play against any lights all tournament. I feel like I might cut this for space. The main reason it's here is because the Stellar Knights are pretty good, but I feel like you can just outplay Stellar Knights. Stellar Knights are pretty evenly matched with this deck, but if you have 3 wiretaps and 2 full houses, you're in a pretty good position against them. You can probably win most of the time. You just need to make sure you play smart. It's very grindy game. It basically comes down to who plays the traps better. Will usually end up winning that game. It also depends on if you draw wiretap. You really kind of need wiretap in that matchup. Otherwise, you're at a bit of a disadvantage. And then double anti-spell fragrance. I already said this was insane against Qliphorts. I'm definitely going to be siding 3 of these just because it's so good against them. So my extra deck, this was really good. there's nothing I missed, and it came up really big for me all tournament. I summoned Castell a couple times. It's pretty obvious why that's good. I'm not sure that I ever summoned Karen Gorgon, actually. Usually these are the two I go into the most, but he didn't really come up. I did use Exiton. Exiton won me a game, and it's really good against Qliphorts, Exiton in particular, because they commit so much to the field. If they don't have a skill drain to negate his effect, or say you have MST for the skill drain, then there's really not very many outs that they actually play to this. They can try to prevent you from summoning it with vanities, I suppose, but usually you can turn off vanities when you're playing against them. Honor Arc, I don't believe ever came up. Gaga Cowboy never came up. Abyss Dweller never came up. Crazy Box did. I summoned this against Qliphorts, but they just bounced it by Tribune Carrier, so it was rather meh. Obviously I summoned it because it hit skill drain out. Excalibur did come up. I summoned it once when I was pushing for damage, and I was able to game my opponent just because of this. This is 4,000 attack. It's a lot of damage. Roach never came up. Dark Rebellion I did summon once. There was other things I could have summoned there, but this had almost 4,000 attack when I summoned it, and it wasn't going to go down like Excalibur would have, so I think it was probably the best. Ragnar Zero did come up against Qliphorts. This is pretty good just because of the draw. They usually, what you're destroying has a sacrifice attached to it, and they'll just replace it, basically. But you're able to take away your opponent's board presence, get some damage in, 2,400 attack, and draw a card. It's pretty good. It also prevents them from trying to respond as long as you have a material attached to it, because you can just destroy their monster when they try to attack you. Black Ship did not come up, Rhapsody did not come up, Seraphine did not come up, and Heartland Draco did not come up. I'd like to point out Seraphine, I almost cut this, just because I've only summoned it once, and that was a long time ago. I summoned it that time to destroy Leo, but now I can play Excalibur because I'm playing Upstart, and this is better out to Leo. But the reason I kept Seraphine in is just in case I ever play against Melodious Divas. This is probably my best out to that. You can just negate all of their effects and then destroy them. So it's pretty good there. I still have never played against that deck, but this is there just in case. I mean, I have the space, I might as well play it. What I did end up cutting is Diamond Direwolf. The main utility I think Diamond Direwolf has, I've never actually summoned it, but I think potentially say I get an Upstart and I want to make use of it somehow in the Shadal matchup. I don't want to leave an Exceed on the field because I don't have Vanities or whatever to stop Shadal Fusion. In that situation, I could use its effect to make Direwolf, have Direwolf kill itself and kill a card. That's really not that good though. That's honestly the best I can think of for why you would want to use Direwolf. So I ended up cutting that. So now I'll get into how I did at the tournament. So round 1, I immediately went up against Qliphorts. I wasn't sure how many Qliphort matches I would actually end up having, just because the deck is so new and it's also really expensive to build the entire deck. But I ended up playing against a lot of them all day, and just won right off the bat. So my opponent ended up going first, but he overextended badly on his first turn. So he played one of the 9 scales that was not Tool, and he played Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon in the other zone, and then he used those to Pendulum Summon 2 Qliphort monsters, and then he tributed both of those for Shell, and then he used Odd Eyes to search for... but see, the problem here is that Tool is a 9 scale, and he was stuck with a 9 scale in his other Pendulum Zone, so he was either forced to play Tool and not be able to Pendulum Summon the monsters he just tributed, or he could play a different monster in this scale, and then he can't search using Tool. So he was really in a bad position here, and I just like basically didn't destroy his bad 9 scale, and I just forced him to not be able to play well the entire game. And even though the shell he summoned had double attack and it had 2800 attack, it wasn't really a problem. I think I just Phoenix chained it, and I eventually what I did was I used both Upstart Golden Ninja, Call of the Haunted, and Sephiroth to make a really big play, and I summoned an Exceed Dragon, which absorbed 1400 attack from his shell, and I made a Castel to spin his other monster on the field into his deck, and then I attacked him, and I think he lived, but he surrendered his next turn. So he played pretty poorly, actually, and that let me win that game pretty easily. And then game 2, he activated his skill drain, and I didn't draw MST or Full House all game, so the only thing I really could do was go for a Crazy Box, but on the turn after I make Crazy Box, he bounces my Crazy Box by tributing his carrier, and then he attacks for game. And there wasn't really anything I could have done that game. I didn't have an ounce of skill drain, so I lost. So game 3, I opened really well. I open the Hanzo transformation called the Haunted combo, where I'm able to summon Apex Avian and Falcon. I went first this game, but I did not go for Samorg because I didn't have Anti-Spell Fragrance. If I did have Anti-Spell Fragrance, I would have just won this game. Because Anti-Spell Fragrance plus Hanzo on the first turn is an automatic win. So I was in a good position, though, because I had 2 negates on the field. So my opponent first used the limiter removal, which I was forced to negate, otherwise he could have just attacked over my Apex Avian. And then afterwards, he used Scout's effect, and I negated that with my second negate, because if he didn't have anything else, that would have just shut him down, and he wouldn't have been able to get rolling. And he actually did not have anything else that turn as a follow-up. I should probably point out that if he was a better player, he would have normal summoned a monster, then he would have used Scout, and I would have tried to negate that. Then he could have chain limiter removal. I couldn't have negated that because it's in the same chain. And then his monster could have attacked over my Apex Avian. But I don't think he knew exactly how Apex Avian worked with a once per chain thing. So he didn't think of that. And then I do draw my Anti-Spell Fragrance that turn. So I'm able to use that. And my opponent can't play a second Scout. And I think he does have one. I think he searched one off of Sacrifice. And he does have a shell that he is able to summon with 1,800 attack. And he beats me down with that for a little bit. But then I make a Castel to spin his shell and attack him. And that's not quite game, but he surrenders. And at this point, I had a Samorg in my hand. So if he would have destroyed Castel, that would have been a win monster in the grave. So I could have summoned Samorg, and I would have had the Samorg Anti-Spell Fragrance lock. So even if he managed to counter my Castel play, he probably would have lost still. I had enough life points that I could have survived that. So after one round, I have one win against Qliphort, so I'm pretty happy with that. In round 2, I end up going against Gravekeepers, which is totally not expected. And then game 1, he opens the nuts, basically. He plays Dimensional Fissure and Royal Tribute together, so that banishes the Falcon and the Murmello from my hand, and I can't draw any monsters after that, and I can't win if I don't have any monsters. I did draw 2 Call of the Haunteds that game, so if he would have not had the Dimensional Fissure, I would have definitely been able to mount a comeback. Probably would have gotten 2 destructions of Spell and Trap cards off of the Murmello, so that would have made a big difference in that game, but with my monsters banished, there's just nothing I could do that game. So then game 2, I go first, and I don't have Anti-Spell Fragrance. I did side it in against this because it's not Qliphort's, but I did side in some more. So I summoned some more first turn before he has a chance to go, and there's just absolutely nothing he can do. He has almost no outs in his deck. Basically, what he needs to do is he needs to MST the transformation attached to the Samorg. That's basically the only thing he can do. Um, he tries to Book of Moon my Samorg so he can set cards, but you're actually not allowed to play Book of Moon with Samorg on the field because Book of Moon's effect sets Samorg, and my opponent's not allowed to set cards, so you're just not allowed to activate Book of Moon, actually. He does eventually draw into one of his MSTs, but he uses it on my second Ninja to auto transformation that I activate during that standby phase, like the turn he drew it. So that was probably a misplay because Samorg was shutting him down so hard. He probably should have destroyed that transformation, but either way, he only had the one MST, so I would have been able to make some strong plays anyways, even if he did the right play there. But he didn't, and that was an easy win. There's just nothing he could do the entire game. So then game 3, on my opponent's second turn, I think, he leaves himself open for a full house, and I full house him. I destroy 4 of his cards and 1 of my cards, and after that, all he has is just 1 monster, and I'm able to beat him down with my Falcon, and he has almost no cards, and I still have most of my cards, and it's a really easy win. I eventually end up using my upstart Golden Ninja to make Excalibur and attack for game. I got like 6,000 damage that turn with Excalibur plus Falcon. So then I'm on to round 3, still undefeated, which is a pretty good position to be in. There's 8 rounds this tournament, and round 3 we get deck checked, which is the first time I've ever actually been deck checked. Both me and my opponent were good, and so we just played like normal after we got our extension. So round 3, I go up against my second Qliphort matchup. So he opens really, really strong. He goes first, and he opens up with the Scout, Helix, Sacrifice, set 3. I am able to make Evil Storm Exiton this game, and nuke his field, which gives me a chance, actually, this game. But he has a Scout and a low scale, and he uses them to Pendulum summon, and then he tributes his carrier that he just Pendulum summoned, and then he bounces my Evil Storm Exiton Knight, and that left me open for him to push for game. If he didn't bounce the Evil Storm Exiton Knight, I would have been able to nuke his field again during the battle phase, or if he didn't go to the battle phase, I could have nuked his field during my main phase. So the fact that he did have that carrier was pretty important, and ended up giving him the win for game 1. Game 2, I go first, and I open with an Apex Avian on the board, and I'm able to control this game. My Apex Avian doesn't leave the board the entire game. Eventually, he manages to get enough cards where his Qliphorts are big enough where he can crash one of them into my Apex Avian, but at this point his life points are low enough that I just use Magic Cylinder and game him. He had a Trap Stun set, but I negated the Trap Stun with my Apex Avian. I was finally forced to bounce the Apex Avian itself off the field at that point, but it was game with the Cylinder. So game 3, he goes first, and he gets a Scout Search off, but I have MST, so I can MST his Scout the next turn, and then I follow it up with an Anti-Spell Fragrance, so he can't replace the Scout with a new one, which I know he has at that point. But he does have Skill Drain, so he just beats me down using Skill Drain. But I do have Regeki, so I Regeki his field and push through some damage. And this damage puts him in range for a loss to Magic Cylinder. But on my next turn, when I try to use Magic Cylinder to beat him, he has Wiretap, and I don't have a Wiretap for his Wiretap. So the attack goes through, and that was enough for game, and he ended up winning. So now I'm 2-1, still decent position. I probably need to go 6-2 to top. And round 4, once again, I get matched up against Qliphorts. So at this point, that's 3 out of 4 matches against Qliphorts. And this guy, he actually opened Scout plus Trampolinks all 3 games. So he's able to get 2 Scout Searches off on his first turn every single game. Except for the time I went first, I was able to mess it up a little bit. So game one, I went second, which put me at a little bit of a disadvantage. I was able to summon Apex Avian to try to control the field a bit, but he was able to bait out my Apex Avian negate, and he followed it up with a Disc Helix sacrifice play where you tribute the Helix to summon the Disc and get 2 monsters out. And I had no outs to this play, and he just OTK'd me. Game 2, I go first, so I'm able to stop his first scout, but he has a second one, and then he is able to push through a lot of damage on that first turn of his. He put me down to 1,600 damage immediately right off the bat, but he has one more card than me at this point, so I make Exciton Knight and nuke his field, and then after that I just win by beating him down with Exciton Knight plus Hanzo, and I don't remember what I summoned off of the Hanzo, probably Apex Avian. So game 3, he goes first once again, and he gets the Scout Trampolinx off again to get 2 searches, and I'm able to right away go for an Apex Avian, but he does have Torrential in response to that, and I let that go through because he has a Helix equipped with Sacrifice on board. So he's going to give up 2 cards, actually 3, but he gets a search, so he gets -2 basically, the Helix and the Torrential, and I'm just -1 the Apex Avian, so I let the play go through, and then after that I lock him down with Anti-Spell Fragrance. He can't play the Scout, he just searched off of his Sacrifice, and I just summon Ragnazero, and I beat him down with Ragnazero and Falcon, and I just use Ragnazero to keep him from putting any monsters on the board. So I ended up winning that one, and that puts me 3-1 overall, 2-1 against Qliphort. And then round 5, I play against Qliphort once again. So at this point, 4 out of my 5 matches are against Qliphort. And game 1, he opened with 1 Scout and 2 Skill Drains. So I lose really quickly. I had no chance this game. And then game 2, I go first, and I open with Anti-Spell Fragrance and a Hanzo to summon the Smorg. So I set up the lock, and I auto-win. He tries to play for like 1 turn before realizing that there's no outs in his entire deck, and he just jukes it up. And then game 3 was also really quick, but it was a little bit more back and forth than the first 2. So he goes first, and he opens up a Scout into a Helix plus Sacrifice, but he has no trap card set, so that seems like a pretty good position for me. I don't have to worry about Skill Drain. So I open up with Anti-Spell Fragrance right away, and he uses his in-hand MST on my Anti-Spell Fragrance. And so I then used my Ninjato transformation after that chain resolves to summon Apex Avian. So I didn't summon the Smorg obviously because he destroyed the Anti-Spell Fragrance. I probably would have been able to win if he didn't have that 1 MST. That MST was actually pretty critical because I had other traps that could have countered any plays he tried to do, since he had a little bit of a board already set up. The lock isn't perfect if he has some stuff already on board. So he ends up then just going for his Scout Search, and I bounce my Apex Avian to hand to negate it. And he summons a second Scout and gets that search off successfully. And then he summons a Disc using his Helix and Sacrifice as the tribute. And so then he has his chain. He targets Call the Haunted that I've set with his Helix, and he obviously tries to activate all of his effects. But I did have the warning for the Disc to send the Disc to the grave, but I lost 2,000 life points in the process of activating warning, obviously. And he's able to use his Sacrifice to search for his low scale to complete his pendulum scale. Obviously, he has the high one with Scout, and he's able to pendulum summon for the Helix in his extra deck and 2 monsters in hand, and he attacks for 6,100 damage. So he had both of his monsters in hand were Qliphort monsters. If either of them weren't Qliphort monsters that he could pendulum summon and attack, I would have been able to win, because he needed all 3 of them to be able to gain me that turn. And my 3 cards that I would have had my next turn, I would have had Regeki to destroy the monsters that he just pendulum summoned and attacked with. I would have had Falcon that could bounce my Ninjutsu Art transformation to attack, so I would have been able to start applying pressure right away. And I would have had an MST that I could have used on his Scout, and then he would have been able to pendulum summon or search, and he would have just been top decking basically. So I probably would have won it actually if he wasn't able to get all that damage in, but he OTK'd me pretty much, and so I lost that round, and that put me down to 3-2 in the tournament and 2-2 against Qliphort. And then round 6, I played against Shadal's, and this was the most brutal game all tournament, both because of just how my opponent drew and also how I played. So game 1, I go second, and I open Hanzo set 5, which is a really good opening, but during my end phase, he uses an El Shadal fusion, and he summons Construct, and I would have been able to stop it, but I just set my traps. I couldn't activate them. So when he starts his turn, I don't immediately summon Apex Avian. I probably should have. Normally I do. I didn't because he already had the Construct on board, and he could have forced me to negate Construct immediately, and if I did that, then I wouldn't be really getting any value out of my Apex Avian, because he would just bring his El Shadal fusion back to his hand when his Construct was destroyed. In retrospect, I should have actually just summoned Apex Avian, because what he does is, right away during his main phase, he normal summons Deco Senka, and all 5 of my set traps are useless. I can't activate any of them. And he follows that up by summoning BLS, and then summoning a Dark Arm Dragon, and then he just OTKs me with BLS, Dark Arm Dragon, and Construct. That's enough damage for game by itself. And I couldn't respond with any of my traps, so that was just totally brutal. Deco Senka is actually a really big problem. If your opponent is able to do enough damage to game you, there's not really any counters in this deck to that. So then game 2, it wasn't a blowout. I just misplayed really badly this game. So game 2, I open up with my Hanzo Ninjutsu Art transformation play, but he has MST for that to prevent my Apex Avian from coming out. I then immediately misplay. So he summons Raiden and activates its effect, and I don't chain Soul Drain. So when he mills his dragon, he targets Soul Drain, and I can't negate Dragon's effect with Soul Drain anymore because it's too late. I needed to chain Soul Drain to the Raiden, and I didn't. So I lose my Soul Drain, and without that, I don't have any way of countering his grave effects that he keeps getting off of Raiden mills, and I don't have any monsters available to try to attack over his Raiden, so he just keeps milling and activating effects, and I end up losing pretty badly in that game. The only play that I really had that I could have potentially done was I could have used Soul Charge to summon Hanzo, search for my Upstart Golden Ninja, and then normal summon that to make a rank 4 to take his Raiden off the board. And I did have a Vanities set that I could have used when he went for Shadow Fusion. I didn't really want to go for this play, but in retrospect, it was my only chance that I had. Yeah, I just played really badly this round, to be honest, and I lost. If you play badly against any of the best decks, Shaddolls, Bring Abyss, Qliphorts, then you're probably going to lose. So that put me down to 3-3. I had a very, very small chance of topping if I won the last 2 rounds, but my friends were also, one of them was 3-3, and then the other one had already dropped. So we decided we were just going to go home. I say that I did okay, in my opinion. 3-3, playing against most of the Qliphorts is honestly pretty solid for a ninja deck, but I think my deck has a lot of changes that I need to make to the main deck in order to counter the Qliphort matchup, which is by far the most popular matchup that I've been playing against this format. Once I do, I think my deck will be a lot better, and I'll have a much better chance of topping. So, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to check out some of my other stuff.